This is The Blockchain Show. The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies and promotes widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology. This is episode number 56. Happy Thanksgiving. Today on the show, Mark, Ian, and Ethan talk to Didier Collin de Casaubon, who is the CEO of Matchupbox. He will discuss with us the debut of Pikciochain, a fully distributed information superhighway that brings individuals and organizations together to buy, sell, and exchange data with confidence.
Can you tell us a bit about Matchupbox and I guess the Pikcio products that I think are part of Matchupbox's offerings?
Yes. So that's the company we created 3 years ago, I think. But a project we're working on since with the current co-founders and myself, probably since 5 years, and myself and another guy who kind of left the boat at one point 8 years ago, at least. And basically, the reason why we exist is that I was initially interested in that specific kind of asset that we call personal data, and it's specific because I think it's an asset that's growing in terms of size and definitely in terms of importance in the digital world, to the extent that it could be kind of assimilate to the currency on internet. And definitely the way it's done for the moment, you as people say, if you're not paying, you're the product. So initially I was trying to figure out how can we as individual get some kind of control back on our data. And again, 8 years ago, that was a tiny portion of what we generate as data nowadays. So, and it was more, the first step were more kind of defensive approach before understanding that actually, if you really want to solve that or to address the sort of concern that could generate distrust and fake things, etc., you have to put all the stakeholders together around not just the table, but in the solution. So that's why pretty early on we had an approach of B2B to C, if I want to translate that into business lingo. So business to customer approach. And now in terms of technology, 8 years ago, we looked at what we thought were the reason of the growing distrust and risk about personal data. And one thing came out pretty quickly was the centralization model that's being used on internet since copied from the computer science world. And so we, of course, tried to be radical on the other side and say, okay, we'll use something very different. And so let's go for decentralized or distribute. And so there were two models at that time. One pretty early or new model that was indeed the Bitcoin, and then the peer-to-peer system, which had bad press at that time, but still in terms of architecture, I thought was pretty brilliant. Both were brilliant, actually. The reason why we didn't immediately jump into Bitcoin and blockchain, first of all, we saw the cryptocurrency potential, but maybe not at that time the exact potential in terms of infrastructure. And also, it's when you talk about personal data, you want to, as I said, include business in there because it's important, of course. You have regulation, you have constraints or growing constraints at that time. And definitely in Europe, which is where we start, there is a strong regulation on the location of the data. And if you have an open chain like Bitcoin or Ethereum or others, then you cannot, by definition, control where the data are, and which might be good for some, but not for what we wanted to do. So we kind of abandoned that road and built our solution initially on a peer-to-peer model that we rebuilt completely, adding tons of layers of protocols of encryption and protection and communication and all that. And then 4 years, maybe 5 years ago, Jorik was by then joined the team with Fabien. Thought about why don't we include blockchain for all the transactional aspect of what we want to develop, and with the blockchain, but building a permission-based blockchain. Being, I don't like the word private chain, but it's more something where you control the big part, the important part, which is the consensus. And I'll come back to that later if you want to. So that's why we built as well. In our solution, several layers, or a layer, we can say, probably, of blockchain, and that's something we start to really not just design but develop. In 3 years ago, it took a good 2 years, 2.5 years, almost to come up with two things: the infrastructure itself, so the chain that we call the Pikciochain. And then things that we developed in parallels, because we're a business, so we wanted to, and that's what you mentioned as an introduction. It's very nice to have technology, but you need use case, otherwise it doesn't go very far. And right. So in order to avoid what you probably know that expression, it's a solution that's looking for problems. Talking about blockchain, where we try to avoid that, and we did that by pitching and listening to a lot of the contacts we have in several industries that we identified as big movers or consumers or producer of personal data. So typically, of course, bank, insurance, but also the healthcare, education, HR. So I personally did that part because I'm not the smart guy in the team. Jorik and Fabien are the guys that you probably want to talk with at one point. So I pitched a lot of these people trying to understand where could we, what were their pain points, and also in that case, how could we address that smartly with our solution, meaning with the blockchain advantages, and that translates into, first of all, a kind of hierarchy of industries that we would first focus on, because we were definitely small, and we're still a small company, and bank and insurance came with the best mix of understanding of some problem, not understanding of the technology itself, but that was fine, but also money and need and budget to solve their problem. So that was the best mix for us. And then we template literally in smart contracts way or answers to these use case. So we have on the shelves currently probably around 9 different way to deal with data, and the last thing we did was build what we call the Pikcio Lab, which allow in a very easy, quick way to customize these smart contracts for the specific customer about the guidance and the governance of the chain. And also an important part and I mentioned that because that's important for our business model. We want to have that chain as the real infrastructure for transaction about the personal data. Is it B2B or B2C? And so there is a clearinghouse feature in each of these contracts, meaning that it's possible to monetize the data, whatever currency you want to use or non-currency, but to monetize the transaction around that data. And with the difference where we split the value in two. It's first the data itself, and then the second part is the certification around the data. Because if you look at the market itself now, The consumers are all interested, or individuals all interested, to, of course, protect their data and make something out of it or get some benefits, etc. That's normal. And that's very well understood. They're not quite ready to pay for it. On the contrary, they rather be paid for it. And that might be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not here to judge. We just have to provide infrastructure where it's possible to go one way or another. But on the business side, there is definitely a more established business model that, of course, is used by big guys like Google or Criteo and things like that. So there's definitely a known market for acquiring data, but also acquiring certification or authentication around these data. So it's easier to demonstrate to our business prospect or clients to what value they can create or save in terms of process with using our solution. So that's in a nutshell what we do. Does that make sense so far, or just interrupt me whenever?
No, that was excellent. That was really good. That was really good coverage of what you guys do and what you're trying to do. Not just maybe with one solution, but with a range of different solutions. Absolutely pick up on your point. Is blockchain and distributed ledger technology a solution looking for a problem? Well, no. You seem to have identified some problems there that you're using this technology to help address those problems. I guess one thing that's very much on people's minds, certainly here in the UK and in the rest of Europe, is the general data protection requirements, GDPR, actively launching, I guess, early next year. How can Pikciochain and your range of products help organizations who are affected by GDPR, and that could mean anybody who has an organization? How are you looking to help meet those requirements for those organizations? What can you do to help?
Yeah, and that's where and of course we took GDPR as a sort of guidelines for building our solution, so it would be fully 150% GDPR compliance, because that's such a constraining regulation that if we were complying for that, then we would be fined about all the privacy in the world, or privacy rules on the world. So GDPR is important, and we actually, when we got out of the lab and start to try to sell our solution, we bet on GDPR a lot, and no later. I mean, we start basically the sales beginning of this year, and we had a booth in at the CES in Vegas, which might not be the appropriate setting, but that was a good training and a test for us. And we had a tremendous amount of appointments that went way over what we were hoping for all the European companies around there, and some American companies who were discovering that, oh, by the way, next year you're going to have to comply with GDPR if you're doing business with Europeans. And so we came back from Vegas saying, wow, that's it. We're ready to have our cocktails on the beach pretty soon. But that turned out to be not exactly reality. The reason being that it was a big wake-up call for a lot of companies, and it still is, that it's coming pretty soon, and they're going to have to do something with it. Now, the process for companies to do things is actually pretty serious, and so we end up to spend a lot, 2 or 3 months, and then I stopped that, saying, educating basically people, telling them what were the implications, et cetera, and then having the result of first of all, exhausting ourselves without we're not consultants, so that was not our business model. Secondly, most of the companies being in kind of denial, saying, okay, we either it's not going to happen, or if it does, then we'll do this and this and that, trying to find ways to avoid it. So long story short, although we thought initially that GDPR would be a big win in our sales, literally sales and sales, that didn't turn out to be quite true, except with some Nordic companies that were a little bit more advanced in Nordic north of Europe, and so we did a few things there. But GDPR is definitely the right part of the spectrum of service that we offer there, and I would say on the other side, when you translate that in the banking industry world, the KYC is what's hurting for the moment. And that's considering what the amount of data about consumer GDPR covers, it's kind of a tiny little portion of it, of course, but that's definitely identified by banks and insurance, and now a little bit more other industries will start to adopt the same kind of process. It's identified as a real compliance problem, a costly problem, and actually when they really start to think about it, a real irritating supply chain issue internally, where basically they're spending so much money to comply, they cannot even think about it's actually an asset that they could reuse internally or externally. Okay. But now the good thing is that the way we are built, or solution is built, is that when we start with that's a very simple use case like KYC with a client, the solution itself is in layers, so it's very easy to move from there to a full GDPR compliant solution. It's just adding layers and basically going more vertical than horizontal. So the KYC is basically a B2B issue or even an internal B issue. And now if you start to show them that, you know what, since the way it's structured with us, you always have the C in the middle, and it's very easy to plug in the C in the picture, then all of a sudden you start to have the beginning of the solution for GDPR, at least on the technical part, not the legal part. And so that's where we are now, and we start to see more question coming back to that, saying, "Oh, okay, I got it." So now I suspect 2018 and definitely 19, when the first fines, etc., will come up, and that's going to start to hurt. Then we're going to have more feedback. So our strategy has been more, all right, we have the big picture, which is definitely GDPR, and we have what you need. But in the meantime, if you go down to something a little bit less glamorous, so to speak, for us, but that we can definitely help you solve, that's fine with me, because we're inside, and we demonstrate that it's a very easy, nothing is very easy, but it's an easy solution to plug in with, because with the way it's done, and you can build upon that, and that's what we're doing. The same way, it's again, sorry if you push the button, I'm going to pitch and pitch, so don't hesitate
it's good.
to interrupt. I can give you an example of how you build up around that little set of data KYC. First, we now have a client who has, it's a big bank, so they have two other departments. One is the insurance company. It's a company, it's a very large group of insurance. And on the other side, they also have a credit cards department, which is, of course, like always credit cards, a very separate department than the retail bank. And so far, these people don't talk to each other. They don't even, you would think as normal entrepreneur that, well, you can try to make the most of your asset, but that's not the way it's seen in the banking world. So it's very silos based. And so the same client that is customer with the retail part, they don't even transfer information towards the credit card, saying, "Oh, you could, you could use the same data, and don't make the clients reshare again and again and get questioned about the same data." So And the same for the insurance. So basically now we have that KYC unit is going from all the different departments of the bank, and they can access and update, etc. So that's already a big. That's why I say that for me it's a supply chain issue, and we're solving that issue very quickly and easily for them. But now we have the credit card people saying, "Hey, could we streamline our underwriting process with access to authenticate documents, basically proof of revenues?" And yes, so we put 2 extra connector that under the consent, and that's where very quickly the customer comes in the picture, because you need the consent, the customer consent to have the basically the block to access their proof of revenue, and since it's through the chain, it's authenticated because it cannot alter there, and that allows, with a little bit of OCR, to streamline for the credit card the whole process, and they can do it completely digital now. Now, the third part, because we're trying to put these people around the table, the insurance people are saying, "Oh, but we're insuring the people that are taking consumer credits with that credit card." And so far, whenever there is a claim, and for these kind of claim, there's like four major reasons why you can claim your insurance. We actually don't even know this is a customer until there is a claim. So now we know, we can identify through the KYC portability, but also could we connect with the 4 provider of the proof of about the claim, that's you unemployed or whatever. So we did these additional 4, and just for that insurance process that used to take 45 days, pretty upsetting in terms of customer experience, of course, but also I can say that's probably pretty stupid the way it's done for the moment, going back and forth and phone calls and emails, etc., asking for a few proof. Here it's done automatically, and it's literally in the matter of minutes, or not even that, where they can have the full file, and now they can underwrite it. So just based on one circulation, one portability of that KYC between 3 major part of a big group, that's they building up the use case kind of themselves. So we know that, but they're coming up themselves saying, "Oh, could we do that?" And of course, and what we're doing is just either connect with provider of certificate, so to speak, or credentials through the chain, which is make the use of the chain. You don't have to demonstrate the usability, the utility of the chain, but it's just additional layers of data in the database. So it's pretty easy to start now to make them understand that you have more data there, and if you get the customer even more involved there, you can build up a real, first of all, GDPR compliant, but don't look just at compliance. Just try to make that an opportunity for a better relationship with your customer.
Okay, cool. So I'm aware we've talked about KYC quite a lot, and I'm probably also aware a lot of our audience aren't aware of banking anti-money laundering regulations and compliance.
Right.
What we will do is put on some details on our website where people can go and explore that understand what Know Your Customer means, what it means for banking industry and you as an individual as well. So we'll put some backing information so we don't have to explain it right here because we could be here. We could be here all night talking about that. But no, it's really useful, and there's clearly a lot of interest from the financial sector in improving this, in employing these tools to help with new regulations and existing regulations, and also seen with banks and finance industry in mind, seen that the organisation, the Pikciochain, and has a place in the BNP Paribas FinTech Accelerator program.
Yep,
now, BNP Paribas, again, for the uninitiated, a huge international bank, headquartered in France, but it's a massive international bank. How did that program come around? How did you get about getting onto that, and what does that mean for you as an organisation?
Yeah, we heard about plug and play a long time ago, and but the main fintech operation was based on the West Coast, and I don't have anything against the West Coast, but I already have to manage a team in France, and I'm here in Boston. So Boston, France is easy. It's fine. It's 6 hours difference, and that's easy. But if I had to do things from the West Coast as well, I always thought that, oh my God, we're too small to do that for the moment. Then Plug and Play announced that they were opening that partnership with BNP Paribas, and since we are both in the US, tiny portion in the US, and a bit stronger in Europe, I say, oh, wow, that's a great opportunity. So we applied to the Plug and Play offer, and that's a long process. It's actually they're pretty serious. I mean, there's a lot of incubators, accelerator programs in the world, but this was a long, complex process. The great thing is that, first of all, it's located in Paris, and for us that meant something, of course, as a sort of more central place than down south in Montpellier, where we have the R&D center, but also because it's a potential partnership with BNP, which was, of course, top of the list of our prospects, and also the fact that through Plug and Play, it's not just a few French companies trying to get in; it's worldwide. So I think they got like 400 applicants or something like that, and at the end, it's only 10. So it was a long, strenuous process, and we got in. So that was
well done.
Thank you. That's and it goes. Yes, we were very proud of it, I must say, because it's a tough competition. Now the outcome are several. The first one is that we were able to, and we end of this month, next week actually, we'll be able to do the what's called the demo. So that's the end of the pilot phase with some of the use of the chain that we developed for some line of business there, and that's going to be also the opportunity to deploy the solution further down other line of business, but also in the real life and not just on the pilot. So that's fantastic way to bring your client and a happy client, because they felt pretty good, and we feel very good with the partnership. Now, besides that, Plug and Play for us is, as you know, a very large organization. I don't know in terms of organization, but they have accelerators all over the place, and all over the place is for us where we want to go. I was in China not that long ago, and with the help of TechCode, which is another accelerator we joined specifically for China, but the combination of Plug and Play in Beijing and Shanghai and from TechCode gave us a very strong push and help to meet the right people at the right time, and the right time being short time when you visit like that. So you can go straight to business, and we are no later than this morning, we received confirmation of a potential massive partnership for us there. I cannot disclose it yet, unfortunately, but it will be probably very significant for us. So that's one thing. We're working on Japan right now to join their fintech accelerator in Japan. So, long story short, it's a great help.
Yeah, and I guess all of this, though, part of the reason we're talking today, you got an ICO launch coming up in 2 days. Is that correct? 2 days' time?
Correct. Yeah,
24th of November,
yeah.
Depending on when this podcast goes out. It might be on the day that the podcast goes out. But I guess I've seen some articles that you guys have put together about it's not just another ICO. And we've talked about this on the podcast recently about potential kind of ICO fatigue. There's a lot going on, and there's more coming. But I guess the fintech programs that you're joining, the backing you're getting outside of the ICO event is actually gives some weight and some value to people who are thinking of applying to the ICO event for your tokens. It's not just another we're only using this mechanism to gain funds, and we'll see what happens. You are it's part of your portfolio of initiatives.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to add about the ICO? Maybe we'll talk in a bit. But anything you want to bring up about your ICO that you want to let us know?
Yeah, it's been an extremely first of all exhausting process, but but a very interesting one, because I suspect, or at least on our side, things change. As you know, ICO world is a very moving piece or puzzle with a lot of moving pieces, and the regulation being one of them, but not just that. And it's definitely true that since we start to push the button and start to be serious about it, and now, which is probably time frame of 6 months, things evolved tremendously. I think in the good way. Although more complex and more expensive to set up, especially for us, where we want to be super duper, compliant and open, etc. Because we have clients that are serious people, so we cannot come up saying, "Oh, we got finance from we don't know where." And we're going to work with you. That would not work. So from day one, we had to be very, very careful of the way we do it, which might put us a little bit different or not than previous ICOs or current ICOs. And I suspect that's going to be the way more and more for the future ICOs. The other, as you mentioned, one of the difference for us is that we have the technology, and we have paying clients. So that makes indeed a little bit of difference. Although it also make it a little bit more challenging in a way that, or for the moment, since we are in a B2B model, our main clients for the token are or should be an institution that will use the chain. And that's where there was a lot of educational process to talk with our either existing or future customers, saying, it's going to be to a token, and here's how it's going to work, and here's what you're going to do, etc. And so it was very interesting, and we received a lot of attention there, and also that brought us attention of people, VCs, etc., where these guys are LPs, and they saying, this should be the vehicle. It's not going to be an equity funding or whatever, but we're gonna be part of the ICO that way. So that was very interesting. I don't think there were that many of that type yet, but yeah, I don't know if you want me to keep going on that, but it's
no. That's great. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware I've done quite a lot of question asking. Ethan, have you got anything?
Yes, it's very interesting what you're saying, and certainly something which is of interest to us and our audience. What's your roadmap look like for the next year? Where do you see yourselves going?
Well, there are several things that we have in the pipeline. As we discussed, we are definitely B2C. So that B2C part is for the moment coming through the customer of our clients. So it's kind of big scale. It comes from 0 to a few 100,000 or 1 million or more every now and then. But we don't have the direct contact with these customers, of course, because these are private chains. What we have developed but haven't really start to market is the Pikciochain, which is the end user part of the equation, and which is features of that are used, of course, when we provide a solution to a business, but we don't talk directly to potential customer like people like Civic or others that could be considered competition for us are doing, and the reason is that, first of all, we didn't have the marketing power to do that, and also we wanted to learn and set up that ecosystem where it's not just the data, but also the certification that circulates. And so now that we have that, or I think we understand pretty well how it works and what's the value proposition, now we want to open that other part of the triangle, which is a B2C dialogue, and slowly allow customer to get in and take their spot there and take their part. I don't exactly know how it's going to play off, because it's going to depend, and it's going to take time for how customer understand that and what they want to do with it. But that's where we're going to focus a lot of our marketing dollars and for some development dollars as well. That's the one thing. The other thing is that we're going to open the code more and more, so that we have more feedbacks, not just on the code itself, but that means we hopefully will inspire some entrepreneur or startup saying, "Oh, we'd like to use that technology for this precise use case," and because we don't intend to develop all the use case ourselves. And the third thing is the expansion in terms of geography. We really have the ambition to be worldwide, because it's personal data is an issue all over the place. And I mentioned China will be there beginning of next year. We're approaching Middle East in very aggressive way as well. I mean, not aggressive, but dynamic way as well, because it's a currency that is actually all over the world, and we will follow there, thanks to people like Plug and Play, but we will follow every place in the world where they start to open sandbox, facilitating an approach like us, where we can slowly becoming or proposing the project of Pikcio, which is a place where you can bring your data and also money and get service around it. Are you a business or are you a individual? That's the ultimate goal. So that's the roadmap.
We're very, talk about a global kind of push from yourselves. You know, we're very fortunate to be a global team ourselves in terms of producing this podcast. We accidentally or on purpose, but we also have, I think, a global audience. You know, we have listeners from across the US and Canada, Europe, I think Far East and Australia as well. We have a few listeners there. When are you guys attending any kind of events out there around the world, any summits or conferences that our audience or even ourselves can kind of meet you and hear more?
Well, there is an event that it's going to be in Russia. The next one is in Russia. I think it's either this week or beginning of next week. So I can shoot you an email about that with these events. And that's going to be in Moscow. Then that's specifically for the ICO. We just did one in Bahrain. And I say that was in China a month ago. For the ICO, that's basically it. Now we're going to start to do specific events, but that's more kind of prospecting events in 2018. And that's going to start one in Brussels. We're going to have one probably in New York. We're still scheduling that. I cannot tell you too much or be too precise on that yet.
Okay, well, but you do get some more information. We can share that out with our notes.
But I will personally be in Helsinki end of next week for the Slush event, which is big. So I'm not sure we can. There's going to be a lot of people, but that's my next event, and then CES next year. So if people wants to see, we're going to be 2 of us at Slush in Helsinki from the 29th or 30th, 29th, 30th, and 1st of December, I think.
I think the only thing we need to add is, how do people get in touch with you? What's the website? What's the best way to find out more information, really?
Okay, so the website where there is probably most various information is the Pikciochain one, so Pikciochain.com, where you're going to see the white paper of the ICO, the technical paper, or position paper, brief about the team, etc. Otherwise, the Matchupbox.com is probably where you will find the most generic kind of corporate information, but also a description of all various use case, and that's going to point you to Pikcio Me on one hand and Pikcio Pro, which is the B2B solutions. This description, that's probably the best way. So Pikciochain on the more specifically what the token will do, and etc. And hopefully some will jump on and invest a bit, and otherwise Matchupbox.com is probably the best.
Well, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
No, that was a pleasure for me, and thanks for both the 3 of you. And I don't know who's going to celebrate Thanksgiving. I don't know if in Orlando you're going to you. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the West Coast.
Yeah.
But
any day to party is a good day.
It's definitely I'm here in the US since 15 years, and I'm still struggling with the that day we're gathering, and I mean, I like the gatherings. Being French, that's something we do a lot, and celebrating as well. But the amount of food, although I'm French, you would think that I shouldn't mind, but I still have a large complicated relationship with that. So I kind of fear that day a little bit.
It's fine. It's about quantity, not quality.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but if you say it, that's fine. I can,
that's fine. It sounds better with the French accent, though. It's far better. Très bien, monsieur.
Anyway, thank you. Happy holidays to both of you, and let me know if I can be useful in other capacity later on.
Absolutely. We'll definitely keep in touch with you and follow your journey through the process with
Super.
Much interest.
Super. Thank you very much. Yeah, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for an easy way to buy Bitcoin or Ether on a safe, secure platform? Coinbase is the easiest place to buy and sell digital currencies. Sign up today as a friend of the Blockchain Show, and if you buy or sell $100 of Bitcoin or more, you'll earn $10 of free Bitcoin for yourself and $10 of Bitcoin to support this show. Join now using the link in this episode's show notes at theblockchainshow.com. To learn more, visit theblockchainshow.com.